Hi, welcome to Fiberchats. My name is Irina. I'm the host here, and my guest today is Anja Sammon. Hi, Anja.
Hi, Irina.
So we've met on Facebook, and of course, I know you as a brilliant brioche designer and knitter, but that's not where you started your artistic career, basically. Like you told me that you started as an artist, right?
I did, yes, that's right. And I think you first got interested in really talking to me about coming on your show for the Artist Challenge, wasn't it? The Artist
Right.
Challenge that I did on Instagram, Facebook. Yeah, it's a kind of, it's not a straight line how I got to where I am right now. That was what I liked about that challenge. It kind of put all the individual little, almost like mini lives together. So I was able to join the dots for the first time really in front of me. And that I really enjoyed that about it. What I started first, where I came from was I didn't do my leaving cert in school. I left school and went into training, and I did an apprenticeship as a tailor. And I worked for a tailor for a few years. And really didn't enjoy it. I did things like, from measuring, making the pattern, making a suit, waistcoat, shirt. And I really would have liked to do something very different. I was always very interested in history and archaeology, and I then went back to school. I did my leaving cert in night class, and I remember now thinking about this now. If my kids would tell me this, I would probably say you are absolutely crazy. I had celebrated my birthday then, and was with another friend whose birthday it was at the same time, and we were all sitting around, and I said, "Oh, I'd really love to go." And this was in the late 80s now, the 1980s, so very. Not many people would have gone away much really abroad for long in those days. And I said, oh, I'd really like to go away and go abroad somewhere and just see somewhere totally different, get a total break. And I had this light up globe on my bedside table, the swivelly globes. And it said, you know what we do now? You close your eyes and we'll swivel the globe, and you put your hands down somewhere, and where your hand lands, that's where you're going to go. And so I closed my eyes. They did this with the globe. I put my hand down, and I remember we all looked at it saying, where's that? And I said, this is Ireland. And they said, what's that? And somebody said, oh no, don't go there. There is a war on, and there are people being killed. So that was in the days before the internet. So I went straight to the library. Then a few days later, I looked at loads of books about Ireland, and I thought this sounded like the perfect country to me, especially for history. And so I saved up and I went to Ireland and went to a museum. I worked in a museum. I wrote lots of letters, and then one accepted me in the end, in the southeast of the country, in a town called Clonmel, and I worked there for 6 months. And at the end, the director of the museum, he said to me, if you like to get a bit more experience in archaeology, you could go to a city called Galway. It's in the west of the country, and I have a friend there, and he's in charge of all the excavation works. Now, in those days, Galway was really being rebuilt. There was a lot of building works going on. And before you can build anything, you need to first go into the ground and excavate and see if there's anything to find. So I came to Galway, worked on an excavation, and somebody figured, I don't know how they figured it, but somebody figured that I was quite good at drawing. Now, in those days, I wanted nothing to do with art. I honestly, I liked it, but I honestly always thought, art, I wouldn't ever be able for it. So I did all the mapping on the sites of everything that was excavated. I mapped it on drawing. And then I was told, if you come back after the summer, the job will be there for you to get back into it. I came back and it was gone. So there was, you see, in those days, everybody was kind of leaving Ireland to get work, and I arrived. So I didn't know what to do, because a plane ticket in those days cost me a full month's wages, and I was a bit stuck now. So I went uptown one day and I met a guy I had been working with on the site. And he said to me, my brother, he got a job up with a theatre group, and it's up by the canal, and they're called Mockness. Mockness is an Irish word, and it means it's like, when a lamb is born, the movement of the lamb jumping, it kind of describes that joyful jumping. And he said, there's a theatre group called Magnus, and they're always looking for people. And now the summer, the arts festival is just over there. Lots of people leave afterwards, and maybe you get work there sewing something. And I went down to Magnus and I got a job. And I was working there for 2 years in the costume department. The first year I was doing mostly costumes. Second year was more construction of we would have made large puppets. It would have been all outdoor spectacles. And then usually one indoor show, like a big theater. It was all very interactive and a community theater. Okay. And during my second year, I then decided, because there was people leaving to go to art college, and I went up to have a look and I talked to a lecturer, and he said to me, put together a portfolio and see, can you get in here and study fine art? And then I left Magnus. I was working with the theatre, then with other theatres. So there's theatres in Dublin. So I would have gone up, done a fitting and brought it back down with me and sewed up what I could to the next fitting. And so then I prepared for the art college, put together a portfolio, and then I was accepted in. And then during art college, I kept doing costume work to pay my way, and did the art college. And when I was finished, I started working with young children mostly, and I would have worked for the Arts Council in Ireland. A lot of artists, they kind of, they get funding from the government. There is the Arts Council, there's the Heritage Council. So I would have applied for those, been put on those panels, and then you can apply and go and work with different either groups or community groups or marginalized groups or whatever. And I did that for a good few years. So I was working in the art sector, and I then worked on a project with the National School in a small town in kind of a bit. I traveled a lot, so there was a lot involved with laying out a project or a program, facilitating it, doing all the advertising, doing the admin. It was a full-on work, really. And I was doing work out with the National School, and I called into that art centre that had gotten the funding for me to go there with a report. And the director at the time, Maura, she was a national school teacher, and she went back after to national school teaching. She said to me, we have rooms upstairs. If you like, why don't you rent one of those rooms? Put together a plan and you can run that as your art school. So I called it the Sammon School of Art. And then I had lots of young children in the morning. I would have gone out to schools, creches, whatever, and then in the evenings I would have run it as after school clubs, adult groups. I would have worked a lot with Irish traveller groups, with creches, with wheelchair association, loads of different types of groups. And then I did that for a few years, and then recession hit, and everything, the rug was just pulled away from under my feet, and I could really see things going one after the other. Things disappeared. And eventually I just had to really rethink what I was thinking of doing. And I had to kind of pretty much, I tried lots of different avenues and different ways of making it survive, but it just didn't work. And eventually I just had to pack it in. And then I went back, did teacher training. And I was hoping to get a job, yes, teaching, but more in the primary sector, maybe in a smaller kind of an art school kind of thing. And I then get a phone call from a secondary school here in town. And the principal said to me, would you like to come in and do some German? Because I had also done some German teaching and language schools, and I did little bits and pieces in those days to kind of just make ends meet. And he said, would you like to come in and do some German for us? And I said, no, thanks. And then he phoned the second time, and then he phoned the third time. And I said, I said to him, I tell you now what it's like for me to teach German. It would be like dying and waking up in a place like hell. And that's what it would be like for me to teach in secondary school. And he said, try it, give it a go. Just stay for a couple of weeks and see if you like it. And we'll look after you and it'll be fine. And I started and I never left. And there was no art in the schools. So a few years in, then I really tried to make the case of trying to introduce art into school. And we had no other practical subject. It was all boys in those days. We've been amalgamated since with the girls' school, so we're co-ed now. But I really wanted to get something started with practical subjects. And we had a whole conversation that started. And then Eventually, we all took a vote, and then art and woodwork and all those were introduced. And now I do exclusively art and special needs. So that's what I teach now. And that's how the whole, after this long wound story, sorry about this, this is how then the knitting came about. Because about 3 years ago, I was at work and I must have looked utterly deflated. I remember going through a time where I was really just thinking, oh, I'm fed up with this. You know, I really thought, oh, this isn't really for me. And I sat beside one of my colleagues from the special needs department, and she said to me, oh, you should really do something that takes your mind off things, where you can't think about school in the evenings when you come home, to switch off. And I said, oh, yeah, I do. I said, I do. I read and I watch TV. And she said, no. I mean something where you really have to switch off. And I thought, oh, maybe she's really onto something. And I came home and I had a look around because our house is a bit like an art store, there's loads of stuff around. And I saw the knitting needles and I thought, maybe I should have a look at the knitting. Because I learned how to knit from my mom when I was I think I was around 7. And I loved knitting. I loved everything about it. And I used all her scraps of wool and I made up those mad mixes of vests and jumpers. And my favorite thing was always what was called patent in German. It's a bit like tuck stitch, or what's now called brioche, And I always loved that. And my mother was always so perfect at everything she did. She is like the goddess of the needlecrafts. I mean, she would needlepoint Dutch masters and she would do lace tablecloths and beautiful jumpers, but everything she would make would always be for a purpose. So everything was always used. And I grew up thinking that I would never reach that level of perfection. And when I started looking back at those needles and the wool in front of me now, I thought, maybe I should just give it a go. And this was soon before Christmas. So I thought I'll treat myself to a subscription to what was then Bluprint. You know how they started from Craftsy, then they turned Bluprint, and then they turned Craftsy again. So I got the subscription for Bluprint and I could not believe it. I swear, Irina, I think my jaw must have just dropped wide open when I looked, because it was almost like I blinked and a whole revolution had taken place in knitting. That now there was these cool young guys making the most amazing things, inventing stitches. There was a whole, knitting community out there that I had never come across, like groups, Facebook and that all. And my kids started looking at me as in, what's wrong with her? Because suddenly I was asking them all these questions, what's this? How do you use that? And how does this work? And then it started off with me using it as a brain workout. When I looked at, my mother had done like brioche because it made sense to her to use decreases and increases and 2 colors just because it just made sense. But now I realize it can be like an art form in itself. And I never had a creative outlet when I was working. I had gone to art college, but there had been these long years and years where I remember a mother once asking me, oh, you're an artist, that's so cool. What do you do? And I was thinking, what do you think I do? I do nothing. I'm working all the time. And now I could do something that was just my own. And that then developed into me not wanting to leave work at all anymore, because now I went into work and I felt like I had the energy now to actually keep going, because that now gave me a real reason to use work to feed what I wanted to do creatively. Do you know what I mean?
Well, I mean, when I listen to you, right, you love to study, basically, like you're going from one school to another, you research, you go like into the libraries and all that stuff, right? When it came to knitting, I mean, was it almost like riding a bike? Like, was it childhood memories or muscle memories of how to do stuff? Or did you also went into the whole full-blown research? And we're gonna talk about what you're doing right now, because coming back to the teaching, you just started learning, right? You just started the whole new adventure. But talk to me about first coming to knitting? How did you approach it?
Yes, I thought about that last night actually. Was it like riding a bike? I think it was not, because yes, I always say to people, because my mother used to say it, if you know how to purl and how to knit, you can do a patent or you can do brioche. But it was really, there was so much else that suddenly the whole area of, well, you have two sticks and you have a piece of string, but actually the possibilities are endless. And I relearned it by inventing a lot of stuff that I hadn't really seen before. I just thought I'd try it and it worked. And there was many different areas that came together from different parts to form now what I do now. But I really think that the whole process I had gone through, where I learned the concept of how to teach something to people, because, I started very small, from doing a little class on the side of an exhibition to doing it full time. I think that really influenced my own personal approach to knitting. And when I first thought, well, I knit something and then why don't I just write up the pattern along the side? But it took me a while to realize it's not just like that, because pattern writing is a serious task in itself that has to teach people something, because they want to achieve something that looks like what you do. So all that fed into it, and yes, I revised what I had learned, but I learned a lot more, and I learned it from a million different places. Like talking to you is a real education. It's really cool. Learning from an instructor, learning from a book, learning from YouTube. So I think it was very different.
Right. Well, so like you started to knit first, right? Like rediscovering knitting for yourself just as a like meditative kind of element.
Yes.
Suddenly having published 8 designs as of today. Like at what point did you decide that, you know what, I'm a knitwear designer, I'm going to publish a pattern?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because I have a thing where it always takes me a lot of effort to feel confident enough that I can say that's what I am. And I remember my lecturer saying to me once in art college, you will never make a good visual artist because you never stand there and say I'm an artist. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I feel I can say that I'm a teacher. I feel very comfortable saying that I can teach somebody something, and that's fine. So I think that the first time when I made that decision to write a pattern, it was because I'm a member of a little knitting group, and people are always asking, how did you do that? How do you make something look like that? And it really came from that motivation, that it's a tool to make it so that people very easily can follow steps. So I think that was my original motivation to write up a pattern. Now, as it turned out, brioche for me is a real brain workout. I had real problems with maths and stuff in school. So for me, I love, that's why when people say to me, oh, you're frogging all the time, that's terrible. And I'd say, I love it. Because to me, it's like, I've done something and I do it again and I do it again. And eventually I get it. And it has helped me enormously with teaching kids about to follow logical trains of thought by doing this myself. So, yeah, I think I did it. I started it off because I wanted to explain to myself how it's actually done. I wasn't really thinking at it from a point of view of I'm a knitwear designer. It took me forever. I swear to you, I think it was my son who said to me one day, hey, you'll never believe what I found on the internet. This is terrible because I shouldn't say this, right? But he said to me, you would never believe what I found on the internet. There is something that's like a Google for knitters, and it's called Ravelry. And then I came across Ravelry and I looked it up and I thought, oh, another one. When will this ever end? There was so much to explore and so much to find. So then I just put it on there.
Children do come handy.
Yeah, and that was came in very handy. And that's where then I came into the whole knitting guild, the connection with the knitting guild and seeing groups and people sharing, nobody being afraid to share, because this, I think the knitting community must probably be the most welcoming and the most creative community I think I have come across, and it does not stop. For a while I thought, oh, wait for, at the moment everybody is at home. As soon after I started, people had to stay at home, and I thought, oh, I'll wait. When people go back to work, this will stop. But it's not stopping. It's a real movement. It's a fantastic movement,
Well,
It's
let's
great.
talk about the knitting guild. So at some point you discovered the knitting guild, and at some
Yes.
point you discovered the Handmaster Knitter program that the knitting guild offers, and now
Yeah.
you just started it. So
Yes.
what made you decide to do that program? Because it's not an easy program. It's not really for everybody. And on top of it, you are very established knitter. Like, difficult techniques, you know how to do stuff. What made you specifically decide to join that program?
I tell you what made me decide was the initial reason was that sounds terrible now, but I think when you really think about it, to be honest with yourself, I have to say I did it because I wanted to have a valid reason to do nothing else than knit and design all weekend, and to really have a proper foundation that is only concerned with my problems that I have to face at the moment, which is, there is similar courses. There is art colleges here in Ireland as well, and they would offer knitwear design, but nothing tackles those issues that I'm trying to solve, which is one of my big things is at the moment, what I'm doing is, this is purely for selfish reasons, I suppose. When I come home, I work on designs which are very much based on my favorite types of art, which is usually a lot of line work and, a lot of arts and crafts, or any kind of line work. At the moment, I'm looking at like really early Christian kind of line work on like a lot of, because I'm doing it in class at the moment, a lot of Celtic work, which has a lot of beautiful line work, how to translate that into brioche. But the thing with that is, it's quite it's difficult to. I call for example, I call my scarves and my hats and my collars, I always call them samplers. I don't really call them scarves, because to me they're a bit like making a pattern in the sampler, and they're just very long or very wide. And I wanted to turn that into maybe sweater designs or jackets, but I feel I'm not really confident enough to know how to do it so that people understand it. If I would walk away from it and I would tell like you or somebody else to do it now, I don't think I would have the knowledge. And I love the tech writing thing, but I really would like to try it on my own. And another thing, which is a funny thing, but Brioche brought that up and it made me be aware of it, is that I really need to learn a lot more about color, because you know how combinations of color in two color brioche, they can make a piece look totally different. You have exactly the same pattern in different materials, different qualities, or different colors. They can have a totally different effect of what they look like. So all those things combined with, how do you answer to a design brief if you really would like to do it? What kind of knitwear designers are out there? What is the business side of it? How do you tackle it? What kind of fashion designers should I look at? This is all part of this program. And another thing that I was looking for was something that I didn't have to get a second mortgage out for to do, because usually courses are quite expensive. And this was the most cost-effective, most flexible. I have a tutor who's constantly in touch. She constantly asks me, how do I get on? She's brilliant. Do I have questions? She gives me hints and tips of how else I could approach something. So that's why this was the perfect course for me. And to be honest, it's new for me to really do something that I love to sit down to do. Like I know on a Friday I come home and I'm going, great, this weekend I can do my course. And at home they're all looking at me going, what's wrong with you? And I'm going, no, it's brilliant. Because today I want to do my fibre analysis or whatever. And my folder that I brought from Germany, from my tailoring apprenticeship, which is like 30 odd years old, I have it in front of me now. And I can still look up stuff and I compare, like pattern design for an outfit, pattern design for knitted fabric, or fiber analysis for fabric, whatever treats, whatever, how does this relate to Ireland, and what I'm doing now. And I can do lots of extra work that will feed in, but it really gives me the freedom to do stuff for me as well as alongside doing the course. So it's for me, it's a brilliant experience. Yeah.
Well, that day when your friends twisted that globe and you just pointed your finger there, do you feel like everything you've done in life brought you to this moment and prepared you for this moment of like bringing all that knowledge that you accumulated along the way from the like random episodes that just happened by chance? It sort of brought you to where you are today and what you're doing and what you're enjoying today.
Absolutely. And I know that this sounds probably very, kumbaya, let's all sit around in a circle. And I mean, I have done so much training, and I went back to college for this master's in special needs, and whatever. So I looked an awful lot into mindfulness and, work related too. But it is honestly something that I have to say. That was a very strange defining moment in my life. And I thought at that time when we were sitting there, I kind of knew this was something that I had to do because there was something there that I had to explore. It's not that, sometimes people say, well, if this would have happened, I would have made it happen anyway. But I am convinced if I wouldn't have done that at the time, I could very easily still be stuck in the same tailor workshop, sitting under the same lamp, the same sewing machine, And that's why I always say to kids, you have to go for it. That should be your mantra. Go for it, because you need to explore, because you only, from my point of view, you only have the one life and you have to go for it. But I really think so. I think when I did that artist challenge, when I put up different pictures of some of the things I've done, when I started connecting the dots, I really realized, yes, there is an actual line there that connects things, even if it is not straight. But everything I've done feeds in to what I'm doing now. And it's almost as if I've reached a point where I kind of feel now I've arrived. I have taken all the different bits of experiences and frustrations and having to pack up my room. I still remember it so well, and saying goodbye to all the kids, all the families, with nothing now, as in what comes next. So I can't do those art classes anymore, starting the school, and I don't really like it at the start. And, all those little bits, they came together. But now this is who I am, and this is really what I think I should be doing. Yeah, absolutely.
Honestly,
You're right.
I feel like this is extremely inspiring for all of us, because we live in this society where especially kids in school, right? They're under a lot of pressure to choose what they want to be when they grow up, what they're going to do for the rest of their life. And people like you are extremely inspiring in my view, because you show that it's not too late to go back to school at any age. It's not too late to find a new passion at any age. And you can always learn something, and you can accumulate all those experiences and turn them into something completely different. So I actually really admire it about you.
No, thank you. No. Thanks very much. No, it's funny because sometimes people say to me, they would say to me what you're saying, not very often, but they do. And it's a bit like, you're always so full of energy, and you're like, you keep on going and going and going. But this is what gets me up in the morning. And it's something that my husband is one of the people who started off that theatre group that I was in at the very, very start. And that was one of their very most important things when it came to their own ethos, as in, you have to find something in every day that keeps you going. Like, age is totally in the head. It's so important that, you just keep going. There is always another way. There is always like, there is never a point in giving up, because life is such a gift, I think, and it's almost our duty, to just go for it and make the most of it. So absolutely. So when I see yourself as well, when I see other people in groups I'm in, and, when you recently, you put lots of pictures up of, showing your work and being in beautiful places, and this is living. This is what should be done. And this is why I am so very grateful for having had that conversation with Noelle, my colleague, in the staff room that day, when she said to me, and she kept at it, she kept saying, no, watching television is not enough. You need to find something, that gives you something. And this is, you're right. No, and thanks very much. But I think you're right there. It's important.
Well, let's talk about your designs.
Oh, yeah.
So what inspires you? Like, where do you find these ideas? How do they come to your head?
I think my main inspiration comes from what's around me. Like, I find shapes in nature really fascinating. And I've always been a big fan of anything that is kind of quirky and full of surprises. So what I really like, if you're looking for hands-on inspiration, what I really like is I would go directly to either shapes that I see. If I'd go out for walks, I'd look out the window, because we live in the middle of nowhere on the west coast of Ireland, so there is a lot of nature right around us. Or I would go to visual sources that I would do it purposely in class with kids to see, how do they relate to this? How do they feel? Because they have a much more natural way to approach things than thinking everything through first, people our age would. And I love line work in mostly really I like arts and crafts, art deco, those kind of styles. And of course the lines go, I think that's what clicked with me with Brioche as well, because lines would go very much with that. So what I really, and this probably sounds horrible now, but what I really don't quite like is, brioche designs that are just brioche designs just because you want to build in some lines. And my son always says to me, oh, it's so flowery. It's really, really flowery. There is nothing that anybody would actually really want to wear. So I would think of something that is almost like a translation of an image I have in my head into brioche. Like the first one, I feel that was kind of successful was where my son is doing, he is in a college for woodwork. So he's doing woodwork design and machinery and whatever. And he has loads of bits of wood in his room. It's a bit like a wood store. And the grains are beautiful on the wood. And I looked at the grains one day thinking there must be a way that I can do a stitch that mimics the wooden grain. And look, I have it here somewhere. Let me see where I have it to show you. And I don't know if you can see this. So I simply did increases, decreases, and I stacked them. So I stacked them one after the other. And then I did the same pattern beside it, plain. And then I I syncopated the pattern so it looked like wood grain. And then I had to search for wood, and I did that. I did it a few times, and then he was sitting at the computer one day, and I looked at an old circuit board there, and I thought, okay, I'll try something similar. And let me see, I have that somewhere else here. And I just use straights. So I started with the same look at the bottom. This is the wood grain same look. And then I went into straights on the top. And I just continued with straight lines. And it looked, how the front and back in brioche is kind of similar like this. And I incorporated like little increases and decreases, increases, decreases. So you have these bubbles built in as well that you would have on a circuit board. And I used like a silvery, I have another one which is greens in the back. And I don't know where I have it now. I have it somewhere. Sorry, look here. So it's a similar look. So it's greens in the back and like silver in the front, and you have those little kind of built-in bubbles the odd time, you know what I mean. So it very much just then looks like a circuit board. So I'm trying to make stuff that has a reason in its design for actually looking like either the source or like your visual inspiration, like, you know, the scarf and the shawl that I did. Well, now this is something I took directly from a design I found by William Morris. You know William Morris, the arts and craft, you know, designer. And I did what I did was I used an edging, which is like a cabling with a bubble in the middle. And I had, I used the pattern here to have, the top looks like flowers, it moves into roots, and then at the bottom, you have the roots branching out. So it looks like a William Morris design, but it's done in this fabric that you can hold in your hands. That's the kind of kick I get out of, you know, doing the brioche. It's almost like an interactive piece of design. Do you know what I mean?
Well, how difficult for you to choose the colors? Like, do you ever like get two colors and you think it's gonna look brilliant in brioche, and then you start knitting and it's all murky mess and you can't see
Yes. Yes, it happens to me an awful lot because you know how I live in the west of Ireland, and we really only have one yarn shop, one local yarn shop in the city, which has a limited number of yarns because it's a fantastic shop, but it's a small town. So they have to sell, you know, yarn that really sells. And there's like a fabric shop that has some wool, but there's maybe 2 shelves. There's very little. So a lot of my yarns I get online. And I would see something that I would really like, and I would have to order it in. And I recently got I have one here actually. I got, I don't know if you can see this. So I got, this is fiber spades, it's wool and silk. And I like that because it has the body, but it has a slight sheen on the top. And I love the combination of dark green and pink. I just think it looks very fancy, you know, it looks really kind of classy. Well, I think. So I ordered those because they looked to me like the perfect combination of colors. But because they are, and I could not believe why it happened. I took a black and white photograph of it, and then it came clear. Because on the color spectrum translated into black and white, they're just the same gray. So they can't stand out against each other. And I have a design that I wanted to do next where it's a combination of 1 color brioche and 2 color brioche, and one slowly bleeds into the next. And I've had a lot of problems trying to make it. I always like colors which go, wow, where you're thinking, wow, those colors are strong, you know, they look good together. Or layering silk with mohair, so the silk comes through and you have that halo sitting on top. I like those combinations, but it is very difficult to get. I love like Stephen West's theory of having a pop color and having colors in the background. But you know, with brioche, you're dealing with the two. So what I do is I usually use, this is after this whole long trail of thought, I came to this conclusion that what works very well is I find a variegated yarn that has the colors in it that I really like. And I use them both 2 colors together, and I start one at one end of the skein and I start the other end of the skein, and they kind of go beside each other. Sometimes they're matching, sometimes they're opposites. So that works very well for me. But I have a few favorite wool companies who I really like, and I really have to say I love some wool companies that would be Irish made. And I find this fascinating because, you know, you used to get no Irish wool. You had to go, they were sent to China and places. And I remember watching a video by, you know, Sugar Plum Circus recently, you know, how she goes into yarn shops
Right.
And she was in a yarn shop in Seattle. Did you watch this? Yeah, tea cozy yarn shop or something. And she pointed out the yarns on the shelf, and there was hedgehog wool on the yarn. And my daughter lives with a friend who works in Cork with hedgehog yarn dyeing wool. And to me, this is amazing how I can now go and I can get wool in Ireland. That is really fantastic, but I would have to order, or I go and I visit and I get, like a bag full and I bring it back. So it's good to see it, but it's hard. I find color combinations are, because they're as much part of the design as the design itself.
Well, when somebody else needs your pattern, how do you feel about it? Like when you see other people's take on your designs?
Irina, I absolutely love it. I think there is no greater kick than, first of all, seeing somebody picking it. I would put out a design call and I would say, anybody would like to test it. And I remember at Christmas, if you remember this, I made a little brioche hat that looked like a Christmas tree, and I kind of crocheted a line around it for like the light chain and for kids with a yellow pom-pom on top. And I got hundreds, and I am not joking you, hundreds of people, because of course it was the ideal present to give to people and to give to your grandchildren and whoever. So I accepted, I think 30 people started knitting, and it was the greatest fun to talk to them, to see the color combinations, for them to find out like which yarns actually didn't work at all. Some turned out totally floppy little, kind of Dr. Seuss kind of results in the top coming down because it was too floppy, or others were like cardboard, and people learning. And I really realized then for the first time that it is a learning process that goes both ways. It is for the test knitter, and for me as having come up with an idea, and then to go back and to revise the whole thing and to really rewrite it with their opinion on board. I feel it is fantastic. I think test knitters are the greatest gift ever. But I always find it important to give something back, because they give their time and their energy to deal with something that I thought up. So I would always give them something back, like they would get, pick any pattern now that you like as well. Or I would say to them, look, I'll send you the kit. There is a shop, an online shop, they Earth Fair, they sell kits from my patterns. And I would say, look, go to Earth Fair, pick something you like, and look, it's for you to keep, something that you like. And some people, actually, to be honest with you, have been turned off brioche altogether because they feel they're not ready. They feel, to me, it's a kind of second nature, which is a very dangerous thing, that I expect people to just get it. But a lot of people, they feel, look, it's fine, but it's not for me. I might try another time, but not for me right now. So it's lovely. No, it's lovely. And I know you do a lot of test knitting.
Right. Well, and I'm working on the brioche test knit at the moment, actually. I'm loving every stitch of it. But
and you like it.
Let's talk about writing patterns, right? So you mentioned that it was also a learning experience for you, because it's one thing to knit somebody else's pattern, it's a whole other animal to write your own. Being a teacher, and especially like you do a lot of special education, special needs, is it difficult for you to like write a concise pattern? Is it difficult for you to stop yourself from over explaining, or do you feel like you're not explaining enough? Like what do you feel when you're writing?
Yeah, I find, who said this to you in the interview? And I wish I could remember now who you interviewed, and because I had to laugh when I watched it, thinking it was the opposite for me. I think was it Imbal? I can't quite remember who said it to you, who said, I started off and I said way too much. I wrote 18 pages, and then I realized I had to tone it down. Now, for me, it was the opposite. And there was a real shock moment for me, because I wrote patterns at the start thinking, okay, I know what I've done, lots of, patterns from different people, and I had a certain idea in my head of how I thought they should look. So I wanted to give them a look, first of all. So it's interesting to look at it, nice to, not just like written out words. So I wanted to kind of present them quite nicely. And I kept them very much to everything I thought people should know. So here I was going, okay, this is a 5-stitch increase. And then I realized I got all these emails from people going, I don't get this. And some people had questions which went to how do you do a selvage edge, or how do you actually cast on? And I realized I really shouldn't expect anything for people to already know. It's really unfair, because if you are sitting at home and you scroll down thousands of things and eventually you come to something that you think, hey, this is something I would love to have in my wardrobe. So you're thinking, oh, this is great. This is what I want to make my own. And then you end up with an instruction that where you constantly have to put a notice up on a message board or something saying, can anybody help me with this? I'm stuck. I don't know how to actually do this. There is no explanation. So then I rolled the whole thing around, and I remember taking out the whatever 2 or 3 patterns I had at the time. I had very little at that time. Taking out what I had and revising everything. And I put down a little bit, even like the basic instructions for any type, how to do a 2-stitch increase, 3-stitch increase, 4-stitch increase, everything, because I really wanted people to be able to use this. You see, I don't really think people buy a pattern. Well, maybe they do, but I don't think people buy a pattern and throw it out. I think they keep it to go back to it another day, or to pass it on, or to kind of say to somebody, look, this is how I've done this. I want to do this again. And it's important to have it like a resource for people so that they can see some other pattern and they go back to maybe the one where it was well explained and they read up on it again. So suddenly they grew in size. And I remember the last pattern that I published, it had something like 16 pages or something, because every chart for every pattern, I like, for example, what I really like in Brioche is syncopation. I really like it. So you know how you bring the background color forward, or you leave the background color in the back, or so one color is the front and then the background color is the front in the next pattern block, and so on. So I like syncopation, but not everybody likes syncopation. And some people think, do I really need to do this now? It's hard enough as it is. So I put in patterns for syncopation, no syncopation, 1-color brioche, 2-color brioche. So I want everybody to know, okay, I want my scarf. Okay, it's syncopated with 3 blocks and so long. I want mine without syncopation in 1 color maybe, and I want it shorter. So everything can be put together by people. And I suppose it works because I never had a question or a complaint about it. So I'm guessing it's right. But what I do is at the start, I would write in now, if you're thinking of turning this into a cowl in such and such colors, only print pages, 5 to 8 or something, I would tell people how to size down on the printing. But yeah, I definitely feel I started way too small. And now that I'm doing this course, I understand that I can edit out a lot. I can actually edit out where if it is designed for advanced, certain things, are not necessarily, has to be repeated over and over and over again. So I'm still learning on it, but I want to make it self-explanatory so people can go and they can really give it a go and they feel confident approaching a project. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I mean, do you feel like it's difficult for you to decide how to rate your projects, because like what seems super easy to you is like impossible to others who are like even great knitters, right?
Yes.
But then at the same token, right, if you rank something as advanced, that scares off all the potential customers from it who might have been totally capable of knitting that thing if they didn't see that advanced rating. How do you decide how you're going to rate your pattern?
Yes, I agree. I fully get what you're saying there. Now, the first thing I have to say to you is this. Now, because I have a full-time job and I approach this design and my knitting very much as an activity I just enjoy. I don't have that pressure to churn out patterns quite often and to turn them over quite a lot and to gear it towards a market. I can very easily say, this is for advanced level and please contact me if you have a problem, but really it's actually not suitable for beginners. And I also think it's fairer, that's really my second point, in that I generally rank them more difficult than they might be. I generally would say this is for advanced level, but I always say in my opinion, because I think, and I remember from learning knitting as a child, that there is nothing worse than getting frustrated by feeling that you're not able to manage something that looks beautiful on a photograph and that this lovely model wears, and she looks so at ease with herself and the world, and she is obviously, this was done like whipped up quickly, and it turns out to be very, very difficult. So I think you can take such a buffing from that and such a hit from it that you might not feel confident to approach anything more difficult anytime soon. So I think it's just fair on people to just say, no, it is actually not very easy. And I had this before, that people got a pattern, they knitted it, and they saw the rating, and they still thought, I thought I was able for it, but really I'm not able for it yet. And I would say, listen, we meet on Zoom and I'll show you. And then you can do it, and we won't stop until you can do it. And I would meet with them, and we would sit and we do it together, because it's important that people get that experience, I find. So I grade them more difficult than they should be, I think. But I feel it's the fairest on people,
I mean, the most logical conclusion to this, right? The question that comes to my mind: you are a teacher, you are a knitwear designer, you're now taking the course to become a handmaster knitter. Do you see teaching knitting career in your future, becoming like full-time knitwear teacher?
You know what, something, Irina, and I know that this sounds really terrible, but I really don't want to make teaching of knitting a job, because I remember people used to say to me, oh, you work as a tailor, that's great. Can you make me a lovely shirt? I've seen this cool shirt, and can you make me that shirt? And I'd be there making a pattern, making a shirt, and then they'd say something like, oh, I thought that was going to be a bit tighter, or I thought that was going to be, the color was a bit different, because I feel that this is really my own, and I would love help people out, but I don't want to sit with people to teach them the skill. But what I do like is the design part. I really like that. I think it's a little bit like I teach and facilitate people, to try to think creatively and learn skills. I'd work all day, and I need this for myself to just breathe and to be able to say, look this is my thing now. I leave teaching in the school and I do this designing for at home now.
Right. Well, how many things at the same time do you usually work on? Like, is it something you get the idea, you start playing with that design, and this is what you work on exclusively, or do you have multiple projects going on?
I usually work on about 3 things at the same time. Yourself, you probably have 5 or so or more. I would guess. I usually have one thing that is somebody else's pattern. So at the moment, I'm looking at the foxtail scarf by Stephen West, the Brioche, because I love the way there's like 16 increases and it distorts it. It's really beautiful. It's very simple. So I usually like to work on one that comes from somebody else. It could be anything. It could be. I did a lacy thing recently, so I like different skills as well. I like brioche, yeah, but this is just for me. I really love trying out different things as well. I work on one that is usually making, which is the circuit boardy scarf. I come up with a design, you see, and when I think of the design, I sketch it out first. Then I make the chart. I draw up the chart, the symbol chart, and then I knit it again with the chart beside me to double check it, and then I write it out in words. So that's what I'm doing with that at the moment. And then I have a third project always that is in the design process. So I'm drawing, where I'm turning that wood grain design into a bottom up sweater. And I have a yarn for it, which is Debbie Bliss, you know, like a wool cashmere, which is lovely body, and it stands really well on its own. So it will look very much, not quite as a plank, you know, on your body now, but it has a real good body for that wooden look. And when you roll it up and you push it up on your arms, it kind of stands, it kind of bends where the wood you'd see like a naturally would have a give in it. So that's my 3 things at the moment. So I usually have 3 things happening at the same time, but I really think ahead. So I'm kind of now looking towards the Christmas. So I'm kind of looking, you know, it's always kind of pushed forward much further, because I know it takes me much longer than it might take designers who have the day to work on it, because I really only have holidays and evenings to work. So I'm working always like a couple of seasons ahead. So I would do the summer stuff in the winter, you know.
Well, I'm super excited to see what you're gonna come up with, and I can't wait to hear updates on your program and the guild, and see how you love it. And I'm sure you're gonna fly through it, but like I'm just curious to hear your side of that journey. So perhaps, once you done with it, you can come back and tell me more about that. Like I would love to have you back.
Yeah, thanks. I would like to. Some people were asking me, could I write a blog alongside this course? And I contacted my tutor on the course to see was she happy with it. And she was thrilled. But she said, I can't really say anything about the course itself. So I do have the little blog alongside it on the website, where I'm talking about aspects that I learn, or things that I think would be resources for other people. Like at the moment, I'm putting together a list of blogs that I love to listen to when I'm knitting. I love listening to blogs when I'm knitting, or groups like our group, or different Facebook groups that I feel are great for people for support, that are open and really interesting. And I've done a bit on how to recognize if you lose the band on your yarn, how do you know what it is? What tests can you do to figure it out? So like fabric analysis stuff, so little bits like that to go alongside it. But I will let you know how it goes. It's a 3-year course. So each year is concerned with a different area. So there will be 1 year that's almost entirely business skills as well. So it's quite, every year is very different.
I'm a huge fan of that program, and I've talked to a lot of master knitters from that program. So it's like they're all wonderful people. So I'm glad that you decided to join that group as well. It's a nice community to be a part of and to learn.
Yeah, it's a really nice community. And to be honest with you, I met a lot of people, and the thing about it is you can do a bit, and then if you don't want to do it all in one go, you can take a break and then you go back into it again. You're not forced to pull right through. Yeah, I'd say you'd be great. Like the Master in the program would be fantastic, because you're so interested in different skills. So it'd be great for you to do. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm totally playing with that idea. So one day perhaps it's going to happen as well. Well, we're going to put all the links to your social media and your blog and your website, and so people can find you and on Ravelry and everywhere and check out your designs.
Brilliant, because I'm not great at that, yeah.
Well, thanks so much, Anja, for being a guest of my channel today. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Look, thank you so much. It was absolutely fantastic to meet you. Really brilliant. I really honestly love this show. And subscribe. It's right behind you there.
Thank you.